You know, when you watch a master illusionist perform, your brain is, it's basically conditioned to watch the wand.
Right, the shiny distraction.
Exactly. But if you actually want to figure out how the trick works, you have to force yourself to look at the other hand. You know, the one quietly slipping into a pocket while the flash paper burns.
Yeah, that is a perfect analogy for corporate earnings calls.
It really is. And welcome to today's deep dive, everyone. Today we are looking at something called the Gap Report, which is this really fascinating piece of financial and narrative analysis focused entirely on Intel's Q2 FY 2026 earnings call.
And our mission here is to basically stress test what we call the Sado ratio of Intel under Liputan.
Right.
Because we have these incredibly aggressive, forward-looking statements they made back in April on one side, and then their fresh reality in July on the other.
A 3-month gap in corporate comms is basically a lifetime.
Oh, absolutely. It's a masterclass in reading between the lines to see, what narratives hardened into actual fact and what just totally evaporated.
But before we get into the missing pieces and the ghosted partners, and there are some big ones, we have to start with the undeniable reality of their current momentum, like the things they actually did deliver on.
Yeah, you can't ignore the sheer scale of the numbers they just put up.
You really can't. I mean, we're talking about a massive $16.1 billion in revenue. That beat the midpoint of their own guidance by $1.8 billion.
Which is a huge margin of error in their favor.
Right, and their non-GAAP earnings per share came in at 42 cents, just completely crushing the 20-cent guidance. And this is their 7th consecutive beat.
So we are well past this just being a lucky quarter.
Exactly. Demand is clearly outstripping their growing supply, especially when you look at the Xeon server space.
Which actually brings us to the specifics on yield, specifically their 18A yield trajectory.
Right, because they were making some pretty bold claims about that in April.
They were. In April, Intel claimed yields were running ahead of projections. But in July, they actually proved it with the Panther Lake chips.
What were the actual numbers there?
So, for Panther Lake's primary SKU, they saw a roughly 50% cost reduction year to date.
Wow, 50%.
Yeah, and they're targeting another 20% reduction by year end. And on top of that, physical output for the 18A node is up more than 50% quarter over quarter.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this for a second because that math creates a bit of a glaring contradiction to me.
How so?
Well, if they are lowering the cost to manufacture these Panther Lake chips by 50% and output is also up 50%, this should be an absolute cash printing machine.
Right. I see where you're going.
It's like, think of a bakery that figures out how to bake twice the amount of bread, but their flour costs get cut in half. The profit margin on that bread should skyrocket immediately.
In theory, yes.
But when you look at Intel's gross margin guidance for the third quarter, it is totally flat at 42%. So why isn't this operational efficiency showing up in the margin?
So this is where David Zinsner, their CFO, brought up something really important, which is essentially this concept of narrative inertia.
Okay, explain that.
So Panther Lake and Granite Rapids are growing rapidly in the sales mix. But because they are very early in their life cycles, they carry an immense amount of structural baggage.
By baggage, you mean the factory costs.
Exactly. The depreciation costs of the massive EUV lithography tools, the clean rooms, the R&D. So even though it takes less money to physically print the die now, from an accounting perspective, those chips sit below the corporate average for margins.
So the factory itself is basically acting like an anchor on the chip's margin until they hit full mature scale.
Right. So the flat 42% margin isn't a failure. It's just masking a structural shift in what they're actually selling.
Which brings us to where the really massive growth is happening, which is the Xeon servers.
The data center numbers are wild.
Yeah, DCAI revenue hit $6.3 billion, which is up 59% year over year. But the Gap report points out this underlying CPU-PU ratio thesis that I find absolutely fascinating.
It's arguably the most contrarian stance Intel has taken recently.
Right, because in April, they basically said the CPU is going to become foundational to AI again. Which sounds crazy when everyone has been treating the CPU as legacy hardware compared to GPUs.
But the July reality completely backs up those numbers, especially when you break down the different AI workloads.
Right, so break that down for us, because it changes depending on what the AI is actually doing, right?
Exactly. So if you're doing raw training, churning through petabytes of data, you need brute force. Zinsner noted that in training, the ratio is maybe 7 or 8 GPUs for every 1 CPU.
Just massive parallel processing.
Right. But then when you move to inference, which is just the model answering your prompt, that ratio drops to maybe 3 or 4 GPUs per CPU.
But the hyper-growth right now isn't just basic chatbots anymore. The report notes this massive shift toward agentic workloads.
And that is the key. Agentic AI is all about complex logic branching.
Like an AI that autonomously browses the web, triggers tools, and makes sequential decisions.
Yes. And GPUs are actually terrible at complex sequential decision-making. When you need to evaluate path A versus path B, you use the complex logic architecture of a CPU.
So for these agentic workloads, what is the ratio looking like?
Zinsner noted they are rapidly nearing parity, 1 GPU to 1 CPU. And it could eventually skew towards CPUs as agents get more complex.
Which totally explains why Xeon is flying off the shelves. And this is but they aren't just shipping raw CPUs. The report highlights that they are bottlenecked by advanced packaging, specifically EMIB-T.
Right, the physical bridges connecting these chiplets.
Yeah, and Zinsner noted that demand for this packaging is in the billions of dollars, not the hundreds of millions they originally thought. So they are aggressively accelerating their CapEx into 2027 just to secure substrate procurement.
Which is a massive capital commitment.
Right, and that aggressive spending naturally raises a huge question. Who exactly are they building all this capacity for?
And here is where we get to the ghosts of April.
The Vanishing Act. Because the most glaring omission in the July call was the total silence around their biggest name drop from the spring.
Elon Musk.
Yes. In April, CEO Liputan literally name-dropped Musk, talking up this massive Terafab partnership with SpaceX, XAI, and Tesla to revolutionize silicon economics.
A huge headline-grabbing narrative.
But in July, absolute clean silence, not a single mention of Terafab or Musk.
And corporate communications, that kind of evaporated narrative is a massive red flag.
I mean, a CEO doesn't just accidentally forget to mention Elon Musk if the deal's going well.
Exactly. We don't know the exact internals. Maybe it morphed into a quiet R&D thing, or maybe the economics fell apart. But scrubbing it from the script is a jarring pivot away from what was supposed to be the flagship validation for their foundry.
And it wasn't just Musk who went missing. The narrative around external foundry customers in general got totally reprioritized.
But a timeline shift.
Yeah, because in April, the promise was really clear. They said, expect design commitments in the second half of 2026. But in July, Vivek Arya, one of the analysts, pressed them on actual customer announcements.
And Tan totally sidestepped it.
He pivoted entirely to technical milestones. He said customers will get, quote, excited once they see the PDK 0.9 milestone in October.
Which is a huge structural shift in the timeline.
Here is where it gets really interesting to me, because shifting from we will have signed deals to wait until they see our tech update in October feels incredibly risky.
It buys them time. But yes, it's risky.
It's like, imagine a real estate developer promising you they have buyers all lined up for a new skyscraper. But then when you ask to see the contracts, they say, just wait until the buyers see the new drywall we're putting up next month.
That's a great way to put it.
Isn't that just a massive shifting of the goalposts?
It absolutely is. Though, to be fair to Intel, you have to understand what PDK 0.9 actually means from an engineering perspective.
Right, the process design kit.
Exactly. It's the definitive physical rulebook for a manufacturing node. If a fabless company is going to spend hundreds of millions to tape out a chip on 18A, they literally cannot finalize their design without that rulebook being mature.
So 0.9 means it's 90% finalized.
Right, stable enough to lock in a design. So Tanz isn't wrong. Nobody's going to sign a multi-billion-dollar agreement until they see that kit.
But the probably isn't the engineering logic. It's that this timeline shift is violently colliding with how Intel is suddenly spending and accounting for their cash right now.
The financial narrative is definitely straining under this shift.
Let's talk about the ASIC boom first, because not all the shifting numbers look bad on the surface.
No, the ASIC numbers look fantastic on paper.
Right. They design custom silicon for highly specific tasks. In April, they said that run rate was greater than $1 billion, maybe $1.2 billion, depending on the math. But in July, suddenly it's approaching a $2 billion run rate, and Zinsner is eyeing a $4 billion future.
Yeah, and this is where you have definitional consistency.
Meaning they just move the goalposts on what counts as ASIC?
Exactly. Did they actually organically double a $1 billion business in 90 days? Or did they just redraw the boundaries on the internal spreadsheet to pull revenue from other segments and show momentum?
Just a convenience pivot to look good.
Right. And when an analyst directly asked Zinsner about the margin structure for this suddenly booming business, he completely dodged it.
Just deflected to addressable market size instead of current profitability.
Exactly, which makes you wonder what they sacrificed to get that top-line growth.
And speaking of sacrifices, we have to talk about the biggest financial shift of all, which is free cash flow.
This is the ultimate truth teller for a manufacturer.
It really is. In April, Intel firmly promised positive adjusted free cash flow for the full year of 2026.
And in July, they completely dismantled that promise.
Yeah, they announced 2026 CapEx is going to exceed $20 billion, with 2027 being even higher. And Zinsner bluntly warned that getting to a positive cash flow number next year will be, quote, challenged.
They even floated the idea of tapping the capital markets to fund it.
Which is wild. They are spending over $20 billion building capacity for external customers that they refuse to name yet, and they're sacrificing their free cash flow promises to do it.
While waiting for a technical milestone in October just to get people excited.
It requires just supreme confidence, which actually leads us to Intel's ultimate narrative repositioning, because the core story of this company has completely flipped.
It really has.
Yeah.
I mean, think back 18 months ago.
People were legitimately wondering if Intel was going to survive as an independent company.
Right, the survival narrative was everywhere. But now, claiming their strongest revenue growth in 15 years, the story isn't about survival at all.
No, it's about capturing a highly supply-constrained market. They are spending $20 billion wildly because they believe the demand is an absolute physical certainty.
And they are structurally reshaping the entire corporation around that belief.
Yeah, look at the brand new things they introduced in July. They are renaming the classic PC business to CCPG, the Client Computing and Physical AI Group.
Right, leaning heavily into robotics and edge AI.
They're claiming the total addressable market for physical AI machines, making logic-based decisions in the real world, could eventually match the traditional PC market.
Which ties perfectly back into why the CPU is making a comeback. It's built for that logic.
Exactly. And it's not just marketing. They hired Siki Lee, the former CEO of SK Hynix, to lead a new compute memory integration strategy.
That is a massive hire. It signals they want to own the memory layer, which is the biggest bottleneck in AI right now.
Yep. They also announced a deepened AI-first collaboration with Google Cloud, and they took that vague April announcement with Salmonova and turned it into an actual operational disaggregated inference launch using Clearwater Forest, Silicon, and Foxconn.
So they are no longer just defending their turf.
Not at all. They are actively reshaping their corporate structure around an AI-heavy physical world future.
It is a complete all-in bet.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap for everyone listening, because there is a lot of duality here. On one hand, Intel is crushing its revenue and yield targets. The Panther Lake costs are dropping, and the classic CPU is making this massive comeback in the AI space.
But on the other hand, the massive partnerships they touted in April have totally vanished.
The cash flow promises have been dialed way back.
And absolutely everything hinges on this October PDK 0.9 milestone to finally secure the external foundry customers they're currently spending $20 billion to accommodate.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up. During the Q&A, Zinsner claimed that Intel wouldn't be putting these massive purchase orders in place for 2027 CapEx if they didn't have pretty significant confidence in their unnamed customers.
Well, confidence doesn't sign contracts.
Right. So what happens if October arrives? The technical milestones are met perfectly, but those confident customers look around and decide the broader macroeconomic environment is just too risky to sign a final multi-billion-dollar contract.
That is the trillion-dollar question. Will Intel's massive $20 billion leap of faith leave them holding the bag for incredibly expensive factories that nobody actually wants to use?
Or will they be the only company on Earth with enough capacity to power the physical AI revolution?
It really is a binary outcome at this point.
We will have to wait and see. Keep a very close eye on those October announcements, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, and we will catch you on the next one.